Hello, Next Level Arborist. Today we're going to talk about how to irrigate trees and plants properly. So let's let Evan take over. And
So I'm Evan Moffitt from Site One Landscape Supply. Site One Landscape Supply has locations all over the United States and Canada. So you should be able to find a branch anywhere near you.
You have a degree, from Cal Poly.
Yeah, I have a degree in environmental horticulture. I have been a landscape contractor for a long time, but now I work for a supplier. Became a certified arborist somewhere in 2006, 2008. I'm a pest control advisor and a qualified applicator. So generally what I do for work now is I recommend pesticides and herbicides for anyone that needs any advice on that. I'm a certified landscape irrigation auditor. I am currently the immediate past president of the California Landscape Contractors Association. Last year I was the president for the state of California.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah,
this is awesome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, we're going to get started with some irrigation techniques for trees. Obviously, the amount of irrigation that you use or amount of water you use depends on the soil, depends on the time of year, depends on the plant type. So that can vary a lot. You know, today we have a plum burgundy here, which is a fruit tree. So they're going to require a bit more water than say a drought tolerant tree or something that's going to last a lot longer like an oak tree. The most common practice in landscapes is to take your drip tubing and run it along all your plants. So take that and just make it straight. So if you have a whole bunch of plants here, the most common practice that you see out there is, people will run the drip tube here and they'll punch an emitter either right on the trunk or right next to the tree in two spots. But there's a big flaw in that when the tree grows, this trunk grows. And so what happens is when you get down here and the trunk grows, this drip tube is held in the ground by staples, so it's not going to move. So then this drip tube ends up getting pushed on to the point to where it kinks. And so it'll kink around the edge of the trunk of the tree, and then that flow from the tree that way will not exist anymore. So all your plants will be choked off from irrigation. Well, not to mention part of the tree. Now, as the tree grows as well, the trees generally absorb all their water from the feeder roots. And the feeder roots are all at the end of the root zone. So the other thing that happens when you have a tree that the trunk grows like this, those feeder roots are no longer right here next to the trunk. They're out near the drip edge of the tree, so they're a lot further away from the tree.
Or even beyond, yeah?
Or even beyond.
Yeah.
So as your trees grow, the irrigation has to be able to change. One way to do that, because when the tree's small like this, you do need the water to penetrate the feeder roots, which are really right here. So you really do want a drip emitter on either side of the tree, and ideally all three sides of the tree. What I recommend, if you're doing just the basic, is to create a loop around the tree.
Okay.
So if you create a loop, you can still do your line. You're looped around the tree. You can use your point source emitters. We have these little guys here. These are pressure compensating emitters. So you take these emitters here and you plug them in, all around the tree. You don't need a lot. A lot of people think you need 4-gallon or really big, fast emitters. You want the emitters to be fairly slow. So like this is a 2-gallon emitter.
Yeah. Could you explain the emitters and how many per tree and locating those emitters?
Yeah, so you want to locate the emitters around the circumference of the root zone. So when the tree's small like this, you have this loop here, and you want to have the emitters go, kind of even spacing. I think 3 emitters with a 2-gallon per hour emitter is fine for this tree.
Yeah.
And then you can water for about 45 minutes. To start, you probably need to water 2 or 3 days a week in the summer, but you'll cut that back to once a week even, and extend the range. So really, like as the trees grow, they need deep water. So you want to water for longer and less frequent. So as trees grow, you may want to change them from 2 to 3 days a week to once a week, but change the watering run time from 30 minutes to, say 60 minutes or longer. What that's going to do is it's going to allow the root zone of the trees to expand and grow deeper, creating a stronger, healthier tree.
So you actually want the roots to be reaching out for that irrigated water, right?
Right.
Not just up tight against the trunk of the tree.
Right. Yeah, because really right up next to the trunk of the tree, there's no active roots there, so they're not actually working.
Yeah.
Now when you're in a landscape like this, you may not need to change the water over time, because as the tree gets bigger, you have other plantings around here that are all being irrigated, so you may not need to change the irrigation.
Yeah.
Now if this is a tree all by itself, you'll need to change the irrigation, add to the irrigation.
Right.
So the cool thing about when you do it in a loop, it's really easy to expand this, because you just have to cut it and put a little bit more. You made the loop bigger.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really easy to change it when you do it with the loop system around the tree.
Yeah. What about the idea of using soaker hose around the circumference of the planting hole?
Yeah, soaker hose works well too. The only thing with soaker hose is that it's hard to cut it and couple it and expand it if it's true soaker hose. Now I brought emitter tubing, which is the same thing as soaker hose. So this one is a 0.912. You probably do a 0.618. So and what that means is 0.6 is the gallons per hour, or 0.9 is the gallons per hour.
Okay.
The 12 is the spacing, so this is a 12-inch spacing. You probably need an 18-inch spacing on trees and shrubs. But if you look at this tubing, so what it is, every 12 inches there's an emitter built into the tubing.
Gotcha.
That emitter right there is going to emit 0.9 or 0.6 gallons per hour.
Gotcha. And
then they're going to be circling the tree.
And you said some have 18-inch spacing?
Yeah, some have 18-inch spacing.
Do
some
they have 24 also? Or?
You can request it. It's like special order, but
Okay.
12 and 18 are the most common. Usually it's 12 for grass or 18 for plants.
So like 6 feet of that would be equivalent of 3 of those emitters, yeah?
Yeah. Like with landscapes, you can go through and water them in a grid formation. Like if we use this tubing compared to the point source tubing that we're using here, and you run it in a grid, like every 18 inches, the whole area is getting watered.
Right.
And so it's not about getting the water next to the plant, it's about irrigating the irrigation space.
So what about for smaller plants? Like say, let me bring it over here. Say we're just planting this little guy. This is what,
Lion's
2
tail.
gallon? Yeah, so for irrigating this plant as opposed to a tree, would that be quite a bit different? Probably don't need a loop, right?
Yeah, you probably don't need a loop because this isn't going to grow to a point where the trunk gets too big. And really, because it's just going to be, you're not going to have the irrigation again right up against the trunk because you still want to water at the feeder root section.
Yeah.
And when you water in a point in one spot, that water zone isn't where the emitter is; it's the whole area that it waters.
Gotcha.
And so, like, you don't need your emitter right up next to the trunk. You need it next to the feeder roots, and you need it to be to where those roots are going towards the water.
Yeah. So in clay soil, that's even expanding
It's
further than like a sandy soil.
Yeah, in sandy soil, you actually do want your irrigation and your emitters to be a lot closer. Now, there's a big difference between watering in sandy soil versus clay soil, and then you can put silty clay in between. But when you have sandy soil, you're going to water more frequently and not as deep. But in clay soil, you'll water less frequently and longer and deeper.
Actually want it to dry up a little bit, right?
You
For
do.
oxygen
So they have like when you look at like a soil watering chart, there's the wilting point, and there's the maximum allowable depletion, and there's a whole calculation, and we could do a whole another video just on that.
scientific, yeah.
But you do want your plants to not necessarily dry out, but you want them to be thirsty. So you want your plants to
not saturated.
you don't want the ground to ever be saturated.
Yeah.
But you want it to get to a point to where it's just beyond moist. So if it's not moist, and that's when the plants are thirsty, and they're really going to uptake a lot of water.
Yeah.
And it's really trying to find that sweet spot.
Another question about seasonality. For example, this tree's going dormant now for winter.
Yep.
So is it going to require less irrigation because of that? And we've got the rains coming soon. When we plant this tree right off the bat, how much water would you recommend for a tree this size? Getting it established, and then for the season we're going into.
Yeah, so you do still need to get established, even though it's dropping all its leaves for the winter. It's still slightly moving. The internal process of the tree is still slightly moving. So you do want to water it to where it doesn't dry out.
Right.
Now you're going to have this on the same line as a whole bunch of other plants, which is not ideal, but when you're in small spaces, that's what you get. It's going to get enough water if you water it once, maybe twice a week. I would say twice a week to start, especially right now as things are starting to slow down. You don't need to water as often as you would. Give it plenty of water going into the winter. Now, when it's completely dormant, it probably still needs to have a little bit of water. Majority of the water that's going to get from that is going to be from the rain.
Yeah.
Depending on where you're at in the world, because this is going out to everybody in the whole world. You may have rain all year round and not have to worry about this, but here in the central coast of California, it could not rain till March. We still have to water in the winter.
Yeah, it's possible.
So it all depends on rain.
Dry winter.
Yeah, well, it all depends on rain and temperature. I mean, I like to say, like, if we have a rain occurrence but it's still pretty warm outside, at least a week before you turn the water back on.
Yeah.
Now if we get a rain and it's cold for a couple of weeks or even a month, you could probably leave the water off for a lot longer.
Yeah.
And depending on how long the trees are established or not established, very established stuff could probably go all winter without watering. My yard at home is like that. I don't water anything in the winter. But a new landscape, you're going to need to water.
Yeah. Good stuff. So that's a lot of managing the timer then, right? People have to manage the timer on their irrigation. overclocked it.
Yeah, and there's a lot of technology that's changed with a lot of that too. So I mean, with your watering technology, a lot of the newer smart controllers can automatically do all that for you, which I highly recommend. Because
Site one sells those.
yeah, and Hunter and Rainbird and Toro, all the different manufacturers make a different types and different ones that work differently. There's an incredible amount of new tech in the irrigation side. I mean, you have your basic controller at home, which you could add a rain sensor to, and it just turns on and off during the rain. That's kind of a basic one. The other option is to get a smart controller, which the smart controllers can automatically calibrate depending on the time of the year and the season and the weather occurrences that are happening in the area. So yeah, some of the smart controllers are smarter than we are. Like they can figure it out better than we can. Some of them have sensing technique too, where they can tell you like valve 13 is leaking, to go check it, or there's a wire disconnected, go check it. But for watering trees, it doesn't have to be so complicated.
Do you have a simple watering structure or volume amount for 1 gallons, 5 gallons, 15 gallons?
There is some calculation that could go into that and a lot of variable. But I could say for clay soils in general in our area, a 1 gallon plant will need a 1 or a 2 gallon emitter to run for 30 minutes, 3 to 4 times a week during the summer. You would double that for a 5 gallon. It's kind of the industry standard is to have a 2 gallon an hour emitter or 2 ones for a 5 gallon. 15s put a 3 2 gallons on. That's kind of the industry standard in terms of that. That's kind of where this tubing is becoming more popular, is because you don't have to change which emitters you're doing or how many emitters you're applying. You just lay it all out and it waters the area.
And that plugs into normal drip couplings and
not necessarily. They make it a different size so that you do use different couplings. They do make universal couplings that can fit all sizes of tubing, which is generally how you get from this black tubing to that tubing. Is a universal coupling, and then they have special couplings for this because when you look at the diameter of these two hoses, they're a little different. There's one other watering technique we can talk about, and I apologize I didn't bring one, but they do make deep root waterers. So deep root waterers are effective because, like we talked about before, with getting the water to go deeper and establish deeper roots. The deeper the roots are, the more likely they're going to be in contact with moist soil, right? So that's really why you want your deep roots to get established, because your trees are going to last longer. They're going to be more drought tolerant with deeper roots.
It's probably better for urban settings too, right? With hardscapes or sidewalks,
yeah, like if you have like a tree, like it's in a little like 4x4 well, and like for the city or something, where it's not getting its water anywhere except for that little spot. You want that to develop deep roots. It also helps with keeping, not breaking up sidewalks and stuff like that, is getting the roots to go deep as opposed to surface levels. An example of that would be, you could use a pipe, say 24 or 36 inch pipe, drill a bunch of holes in it, or use perforated drain pipe, drain grate on top of it, and then have like a soaker connection here.
Spaghetti.
Yeah, spaghetti or like a bubbler.
Okay.
And then it would water down that tube. It would essentially fill the tube with water, giving the tree water at all levels of the root zone, expanding the root zone. They do make these, Hunter, Rainbird, Toro, they all make deep root watering systems that you can your hard tubing, and then they water the profile of the tree.
Wow. So then drip it and mulch it. Does mulch help?
Yeah, so mulch is going to help. You mean like mulch or mixing organic matter into the soil?
Well, both.
Right?
Yeah.
So if you're mixing organic matter into the soil, whether it's some humic acid products or compost, stuff like that, that's going to increase the uptake of nutrients and water to your plants. So you definitely want to increase the organic matter in the soils. A lot of times what I see is people don't do it in sandy soils, which is actually in the a lot of people don't use it a lot in sandy soils, which is funny because in sandy soils, your tree will grow really great for the first year.
Yeah.
And you'll be like, wow, I didn't need to add any organic matter because it has all this room to grow. Problem is that those soils don't have any organic matter in them. So your tree may grow great because it's growing with all of this organic matter for a year, but then 2-5 years down the road, you wonder what's going on with my tree. There's no organic matter anywhere in the soil.
Yeah.
So
it's depleted.
You got to add a lot of organic matter in order for it to hold water and for it to increase the nutrient uptake.
And mulching reduces the irrigation requirement, right? Because it retains moisture.
Yeah. So and mulching keeps the soil moisture temperature low as well, and warm in the winter. So it's also an insulator if you're in a really cold area. So mulching will keep it insulated as well. Yeah. Because you don't want your roots to freeze as well. But mulch is great all around because it protects it in the winter. It also protects it in the summer from evaporation and keeps the water moisture level good.
Oh, thank you, Evan.
Yeah,
that's great.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, likewise.
Thanks for being a pro.